What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Happy stress-free NFL game day, a full slate of NFL action without you having to be worried about being heartbroken by the Green Bay Packers, which has been something that's happened a few too many times this season. So should be a fairly stress-free day if you're a Packer fan. What I wanted to go over today is the Packers' path to the playoffs. A little alliteration there for you. Personally, not trying to be a downer, not trying to get your Sunday off on the wrong foot, but I don't see this as overly realistic. I've had people DM me or shoot me, or mention me on Twitter and ask what are the playoff scenarios? And I'm just, quite frankly, at the point right now where I simply don't believe that this team can win 4 straight games against the opponents that they have upcoming. Can they beat the Rams on Monday Night Football? Sure, I think that's quite possible. Although they get a little bit of a spark from Baker Mayfield and coming off a nice win, and they're actually coming off basically what amounts to a bye week as well, with a Thursday night game going to a Monday night game. So I think that game just got a little bit harder with the addition of Baker. And then you've got, the Dolphins on Christmas Day. You've got the Vikings at home and then the Lions at home. Insurmountable? No. Could they win those games? Certainly. We know they have the talent to do so. It would just be completely out of left field for this team to play incredibly inconsistent, bad football all year long and then end the season on a 5-game winning streak, including games against the Dolphins and the Vikings in that row of games. I don't see that as super realistic, but it doesn't change the fact that the Packers do still have a path to the playoffs. However realistic that is, I will leave that up to you. And I do think it's interesting nonetheless to discuss and kind of go over, and I have got a lot of questions in regards to it. So let's take a look at it today. See if the Packers have a realistic opportunity to make the playoffs. If you look at the different models, I think they're around 4 to 5%. Some models have them around 8 to 9%. Either way, it's about a less than 10% chance. And I think you're going to see why that is today. As mentioned, I think the hardest aspect of all of this is probably just the Packers winning the 4 games remaining on their schedule. But we'll go through all the scenarios. I think it's probably easiest to start with looking at the NFC playoff picture. So I should start by saying they can only get 2 seeds. They can get the 6th seed or the 7th seed. 1 through 5 are completely out of reach. They can't get there. There's nothing they can do. They can't win the North. They can't get the 5th seed. It's just the 6th or the 7th. So even if they run the table and even if they get some things falling their way, the highest seed that they can get remaining this year is the 6th seed, which quite frankly is still pretty impressive that even throughout this year where they've been, 3 games below 500 and we're just 4 games below 500 a game ago, are still in the opportunity or at least in a situation where they could get the 6th or 7th seed. But that is the best that they can absolutely do. Right now, Eagles are the 1, Vikings are the 2, 49ers are the 3, Bucks are the 4, Cowboys are the 5. You have the Giants as the 6th seed at 7-4-1, the Seahawks at 7-5, and then the Commanders at 7-5-1, and then you've got some other teams mixed in, but the Packers ultimately at 5-8. And the first thing you might be thinking is, I didn't mention the Lions, and the Lions are ahead of the Packers. The Packers play the Lions, and in order for this all to come to fruition, the Packers basically have to beat the Lions. There's some small, minute possibility that they could get away with an NFC loss. Making it to the Lions is the hardest situation, and they need a ton of help, so we're not even going to go down that path. But for basically all realistic purposes, they're going to have to win out and have to beat the Lions, which is going to get them ahead of the Lions. And the other teams that are, have the ability, the Panthers, the Falcons, some of those teams aren't really going to end up in the conversation in almost every scenario. There's a Doctor Strange set of scenarios that we're not going to go over every single one of these today. I want to go over the realistic ones. And my point in discussing this aspect to you is you don't need to really worry about the Lions or the Panthers or the Falcons. That stuff is all going to take care of itself. Same thing with the Cardinals. You just really have to focus on the Packers, the Giants, the Commanders, and then whoever loses the NFC West, either the Seahawks or the 49ers. So Lions, Falcons, Panthers, Cardinals, ignore all of the garbage. That's not going to matter. If any of that stuff ends up mattering, it means that a lot of other things have already gone wrong, which makes the Packers playoff possibilities like probably less than 1% at that point. So ignore all that. It's just noise, and just focus on really, again, Giants, Commanders, and the loser of the NFC West, which is either going to be the Seahawks or the 49ers. The 49ers, as mentioned, could play a role, but it's much less likely. More on that in just a little bit. So of those 4 teams, the Giants, the Commanders, the Packers, and the loser of the NFC West, likely the Seahawks, if we're talking about this scenario, the Packers need to finish either first or second out of that group of teams. Again, Packers, Giants, Commanders, and the loser of the NFC West. They need to finish first or second in that group. If they finish first out of that group, they will be the 6th seed. If they finish second out of that group, they will be the 7th seed. If they finish anything else, it doesn't matter because they won't be in the playoffs. So they need to finish first or second out of the Giants, the Commanders, the loser of the NFC West, and the Packers. So just remember that. To give you a better idea of what that kind of looks like, here are the schedules for each of the remaining teams. The Giants face the Eagles. They go to the Commanders. They go to the Vikings, Colts at home, and then at Eagles. So that's not an easy schedule. That's a schedule where the Giants could easily maybe just win one of those games, maybe just the Colts, right? Eagles is likely a loss. At Commanders could be a loss. At Vikings could be a loss. Colts, probably a win, especially when you're at home. And then at Eagles, that's a scenario where the Giants could lose a good chunk of those games. Commanders' remaining schedule, they also have a bye this week, just like the Packers. Then they face the Giants. They go to the 49ers, which could be a loss. They face the Browns with Deshaun Watson now at quarterback. That could be a loss. And then they face the Cowboys. That could be a loss. So they have a tough schedule as well. The Seahawks, they face the Panthers at home. That's probably a win. 49ers at home. 49ers have a 3rd string quarterback. That could be a win. They go to the Chiefs. That's probably a loss. Jets kind of in a coin flip. Rams, they probably win at home. So Seahawks becomes much tougher because they have a much easier schedule than any of those teams, including the Packers. And again, Packers face Rams at home, at Dolphins, Vikings at home, Lions at home. If you're looking for some piece of good news, the Packers cannot be eliminated this week. So if that is your concern, if you think you're just going to sit home, and I said, there's not going to be any heartbreak this week, the Packers cannot be eliminated this week. So no matter what happens, no matter who wins, no matter who loses, they will still be alive going into next week. Now, if you're hoping that, in some scenario, the Packers would be eliminated, so maybe they'd face Jordan Love, or maybe they'd start quote unquote tanking, that's not going to be the case. When they go into next week, they will still be alive. Now, I didn't look at all the scenarios, just totally transparent, to see if there's a scenario where they could get eliminated prior to playing on Monday Night Football, depending on what happens next week. Off the top of my head, I don't think so, but I didn't look into that too much. But either way, I don't think it's going to change their game plan at that point. So either way, going into next week, they will still be alive no matter what happens this week. One other interesting note, the Packers don't technically have to win out. They can still get in with a loss. What I would say about that is it once again becomes much less realistic, but if they're going to lose a game, it almost has to be against the Dolphins. It doesn't 1,000,000% have to be against the Dolphins, but it makes things a heck of a lot easier because that is a non-conference game, and if they lose to a conference team, they start losing a lot more of the tiebreakers within the NFC, and they need a crap ton more help. And if they lose one more game and it happens to be against the Lions, they need even more help because they're going to need help from the teams that are playing the Lions in other games as well. So theoretically, they can lose one game, but if they do, it better be against the Dolphins, and they're still going to need a lot of help. The easiest scenario there is they would win their games besides the Dolphins game. They would have the Commanders lose the remainder of their games, including the Giants, 49ers, Browns, and Cowboys. Not totally unthinkable. And they would have to have the Seahawks lose to the 49ers, Chiefs, and Jets, and either the Panthers or the Rams. Technically, they just need to lose 4 games, but in all likelihood, they're going to beat either the Panthers or the Rams. So you probably need them to lose to the 49ers, Chiefs, Jets, and one of those other games, either the Panthers or the Rams. So Commanders would need to lose out. Seahawks would need to go 1-4. The Packers could go 3-1, but that loss would need to be the Dolphins. They may need a little bit of help at the bottom of the NFC. That stuff should theoretically work itself out based on their opponents and how bad some of those teams are. But in likelihood, if they go 3-1, lose to the Dolphins, Commanders lose out, Seahawks go 1-4, they in all probability, like 99% chance, would get in the playoffs with that record. So there is an opportunity that they could get in with just a 3-1 record remaining. But just one more time, that loss is going to be much more advantageous to making things still possible if it's against the Dolphins. And if it's against any of the NFC teams, it makes things much, much more complicated. In all reality, winning out is the first step. You got to win your 4 games. And let's just be real. They don't win those 4 games. They shouldn't be in it almost no matter what anyway. But if they don't win the 4 games with their life on the line, they really probably shouldn't be in it anyway. And that's the most realistic first step, is by beating the Rams, beating the Dolphins, beating the Vikings, beating the Lions, and then hoping you get some help. So let's take a look at the most realistic scenario that I could possibly find that would get the Packers in the playoffs. And it's not super realistic, but this is probably the best one that you can, again, possibly find to give the Packers a real puncher's chance, or to get them in the playoffs. Let's just say it that way. Packers win out. They go 4-0 in their remaining games. The Giants go 1-4. The Commanders go 1-3. And that's it. Giants 1-4. Commanders 1-3. Packers 4-0. So as we play that out the remainder of the season, this week we would want the Eagles to beat the Giants. In week 15, the Commanders would beat the Giants. The Packers would beat the Rams. All right, so we're not terrible so far. Eagles should beat the Giants. Commanders can easily beat the Giants. They just tied a week ago. Packers can beat the Rams. All right, 49ers beat the Commanders in week 16. That's possible. Vikings beat the Giants in week 16. No fun to cheer for the Vikings, but that's possible. Packers beat the Dolphins. I don't know how possible that is, but again, we know the Packers basically have to go 4-0. In week 17, Browns beat the Commanders. That's possible. Again, the Browns probably a little bit better with Deshaun Watson as they keep going along. Packers beat the Vikings. Going to be tough, but again, we know the Packers have to go 4-0. And then in week 18, the Packers beat the Lions. Possible. Eagles beat the Giants. Possible. Cowboys beat the Commanders. Possible. That's it. That's a lot. That's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 games that need to go exactly the way that the Packers want them to go. But none of those are super unrealistic, right? Probably the biggest unrealistic ones are the Packers versus the Dolphins and the Packers versus the Vikings. But assuming the Packers go 4-0, Eagles over Giants, Commanders over Giants, 49ers over Commanders, Vikings over Giants, Browns over Commanders, Eagles over Giants, Cowboys over Commanders. None of those are unrealistic at all. Just basically you have to hit a 17 parlay if you go 4-0, right? And that's the most realistic scenario that's out there. There are a couple other interesting ones that follow the 49ers. And I mentioned that there is some possibility there. If the 49ers would lose out the remainder of their games, a couple other scenarios open up. You might be thinking, Andy, the 49ers have been really good. The odds that they lose out, probably not great. I would agree with you, but they are on their third string quarterback now in Brock Purdy. Let's just say Brock Purdy ends up being awful. And they've got 3 really tough games coming up. All right, so they have the Buccaneers. I should say maybe not really tough, but Buccaneers, at Seahawks, and Commanders. Those are 3 games that with a third string quarterback, you can easily lose. Let's say they lose 3 in a row, and then maybe they have a couple injuries on the defensive side of the ball. Then they finish up at Raiders and Cardinals at home. I doubt very much that they lose out. But when you're on a third string quarterback, and again, if you suffer a couple injuries here or there, anything is possible. Do I expect Kyle Shanahan and that team with that defense, that offensive line, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, etc., to get through at least a couple of those games? I very much do. But if they would all of a sudden hit a couple roadblocks, maybe suffer a couple injuries, and somehow end up losing out, Then you just either need the Giants to go 1-4, likely beating the Colts, losing to the Eagles, Commanders, Vikings, and Eagles again, or so Giants go 1-4, or the Commanders lose to the Giants, Browns, and Cowboys. Also, not completely without, out of the realm of possibility. So 49ers lose out, and either the Giants go 1-4 or the Commanders go 1-3, with that win being against the Jets, the loss being to the Giants, Browns, and Cowboys. So a couple scenarios there. Sorry, not the Jets. The Commanders would have to. The Commanders play remaining Giants, 49ers, Browns, and Cowboys, and they would need to go 1-3, so beating the 49ers. Sorry, not the Jets in that game. My apologies. All right, there's a lot of scenarios here. As you can tell, I'm doing my best to Doctor Strange myself through all of the different scenarios, but that would be the scenario. So just to recap that one more time, 49ers lose out, and either the Giants go 1-4 or the Commanders lose to the Giants, Browns, and Cowboys while beating the 49ers in the process. So there are other scenarios that are out there. I will say we will know a lot more after next week's games. So besides the games that you have this week, next week, the 49ers play the Seahawks, the Commanders play the Giants. So you're going to get a better idea of what teams you want to cheer for to lose after those games, because one of those teams is going to win in each of them. The other one, you're probably going to want to go on a pretty massive losing streak. So cheer this week for the Eagles over the Giants, the Panthers over the Seahawks, and the Bucks over the 49ers, and then reevaluate in the coming weeks. We know the Packers are almost for sure going to need to win their last 4 games. Those are the good news. Those are the good scenarios, the possibilities. The bad news, I hate ending in bad news, but the bad news is if the Giants get 2 wins, the Commanders get 2 wins, or the Seahawks get 3 wins, any of those, all of those would give them the lead over the Packers. So Giants with 2 wins means the Packers can't catch up to them. Commanders get 2 wins means the Packers can't catch up to them. Seahawks get 3 wins means the Packers can't catch up to them. Just 2 of those scenarios would have to take place, and there's nothing the Packers can do to make the playoffs. So take a look at it this way. In week 14, if the Seahawks beat the Panthers, which will be the very favored team, the Seahawks over the Panthers in that game. In week 15, if the Giants beat the Commanders, probably favorites in that game. Week 17, Seahawks beat the Jets, probably a coin flip. Week 17, Giants beat the Colts, Giants will be favorites. And week 18, the Seahawks beat the Rams, Seahawks will be the favorites. If just that happens, Packers can't do anything. There's literally nothing that they can do if those 5 games go that way. Seahawks over Panthers, Giants over Commanders, Seahawks over Jets, Giants over Colts, Seahawks over Rams. Those 5 games happen just that way. Nothing the Packers can do. And again, with 2 wins for the Giants and 2 wins for the Commanders, it's done. Giants 2 wins, Seahawks 3 wins, it's done. Commanders 2 wins, Seahawks 3 wins, it's done. There are so many different scenarios that would eliminate the Packers, and that doesn't even include scenarios where the Packers actually lose games, which starts getting really, really tough if they were to actually start dropping any of those games. Like I said, could maybe, very slim chance lose to the Dolphins and still keep things alive. But in all likelihood, they need to win out, and they need a lot of help. So one more time, cheer for the Eagles over the Giants this week, cheer for the Panthers over the Seahawks this week, and the Bucks over the 49ers. Those are the 3 games that you really have a legitimate rooting interest in, and then we'll reevaluate as things go on after that. That does it for me today. Enjoy your stress-free, Packer-free Sunday. Full slate of games. Should be fun. I will be right back here tomorrow with an all-new topic and an all-new episode, so make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.